Welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast, where leaders of all sorts come to grow and expand their influence in healthy and holistic ways. Because we know that when a leader gets better, everyone wins. I'm your host, Whitney Putnam, and I don't know about you, but I have tried a lot of things in my lifetime. From lemonade stands when I was younger and several different mission-driven projects, I've always wanted them to be successful. And I'm guessing the same is for you. At some level, everyone wants to be successful. It's true that there is an extraordinary amount of grace and luck involved with success, but there are also things that we can control. Today's guest is going to reveal how you can position your organization to succeed. Les McKeown is the founder and CEO of Predictable Success. Les started as a serial entrepreneur. He was involved in the launch of more than 40 companies before he was 35. Les began to see that all growing organizations experienced similar challenges. He started to codify repeating patterns of growth, which led him to publish his Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, Predictable Success, getting your organization on the growth track and keeping it there. Les is a trusted advisor to fast growth small and medium-sized enterprises, thriving not-for-profits, Fortune 500 companies, and a number of the largest government agencies in the world. The GLN has benefited from Les's wisdom, and we can tell you from experience, his ideas are profoundly wise, but also amazingly practical and actionable. Les has actually come to the GLN to advise our organization, but we wanted to bring the wisdom to you. In this episode, Les sits down with David Ashcraft, CEO of the Global Leadership Network, and together they work through the Predictable Success model. This is a great conversation for anyone who wants to know how to recognize and overcome the challenges to growth for any type of organization. This conversation was so great, we actually broke it into a 2-part series. The best part is you can go ahead and send it to the teams you work with and begin processing where your team or organization might be in the Predictable Success model. Let's go ahead and listen to the conversation between David Ashcraft and Les.
Les, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here, David. Hi, everybody.
So you're going to, as we talk today, you're going to hear me say that Les is one of my favorite people when it comes to business and leading organizations. I have actually, Les, now, as I was thinking about this, had opportunity to involve you in 3 different organizations that I'm a part of. One was LCBC Church, a church of about 25,000 people in weekly attendance now. And I think on 2 different occasions, we brought Les in to work with us and help us and give us some guidance. One is here at the Global Leadership Network. And so you spent time with our staff and a number of our leaders. And then also a business opportunity that I'm a part of on a board. And so I asked Les to step in. So all of that to say, I highly respect Les, and I'm excited to have you spend time with us today. So.
It's just great to be here, and it's been one of the greatest privileges of the last number of years to be part of not just an event, but the process in LCBC of you moving out and the way in which you and Jason handled that transition. It was really a benchmark for doing something well and doing it with grace and doing it in a way that not just maintained what you'd built over, I don't know how long you'd been at
32 years, yeah.
There you go. But then allowing for it to develop into what it needed to become next. So that's been just an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Les. So maybe tell a little bit about your background. And the way I know you is you wrote a book called Predictable Success. It's a number of years old now, and yet I think it's still incredibly relevant and just a great roadmap for organizations to follow. But tell us a little bit about your background, how you even got into and came up with this idea of predictable success.
I grew up in Belfast, back in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and my time there mapped perfectly a pretty dreadful civil war. So I didn't have, the most spectacularly wonderful early upbringing, and that turned me into a bit of a nerd from a very early stage. And I got fascinated by business, which don't ask me why. I don't know why as a kid. I thought business was exciting, but I did. And one of my first mentors suggested I should be, devote my time to getting either my ticket as an attorney, solicitor as it would be back in the UK, or as an accountant, because if I was interested in business, that would be a good way to sort of get a grounding on it. And I choose the accounting route. I qualified as what would be a CPA here, chartered accountant back in the UK. And to cut a very long story short, what I discovered was what I was actually interested in were the dynamics of groups of people achieving something. I wouldn't have known even how to use that phrase when I was 14 or 15, but that's what I was fascinated about. And again, not to bore you with the full, our listeners with the full details, but I happened to put my slate out as a practicing CPA right at the time when there was a massive surge towards entrepreneurship across the whole of the UK. We had an economy that was basically, we were surrounded by factories of US and South Korean companies. So LG, Daewoo, Ford, and if one of them caught a cold, 15,000 people would lose their job. And so there's a huge pressure to build local indigenous businesses. I got involved in all of that and became what would now be called a serial entrepreneur. Started advising people, and then people started asking me if I would, rather than just advise them, join with them and help launch things. I got to cherry pick 6 or 8 businesses every year for a decade. I ended up launching over 40 businesses, most of them with other people. And David, even a dumb Irishman is going to start seeing some patterns if you do something often enough. And the patterns I was interested in were now what I recognize to be the patterns of group success. How do we as a group achieve our common goals, which at that stage in my career was fully around business and for-profit work. And I began to just see these patterns. And it was back in the day, we had these things called lab books, LAB, and they were thin, tall exercise books that you would write on. And I've still got probably around 50 or 60 of those, just filled with these doodles of what I thought were common patterns that I began to see play out in those businesses that I was helping launch. Another guy who was a friend of mine was asked to build out what became, so far as we could discover, the first incubation center in Europe. Now we've got Techstars, we've got all that sort of stuff, Y Combinator, but there was nothing like that back then. And we invented this thing. He asked me to join him. And we started in Belfast, 72% male unemployment, teaching people how to launch businesses. It became an enormous, we knocked it out of the park in the first year. Economic development agencies all over the world asked us if we would start to build programs for them because they wanted to build their business. That took us into helping people get into second, third stage growth because that was good for the agencies we were working with. Their tax base would grow. So I'm going to fast forward 15 years. I end up here in the United States, moved out here just in time for the millennium to change, 1999, because I thought, crafted what I believed to be, I had recognized what I believed to be the patterns of growth of organizations right up to the very large stage. And I wanted to come out here, spend a few years proving out what I thought would be that model. And then, as you mentioned a few moments ago, about 2008, I thought, I think I've got words for all of this. And I started to write what became the book, Predictable Success, which shows the whole arc of growth. Now, and I'll finish this fire hose with this, right up to that point, I'd been thinking, just the way my mind worked, about all of it in the context of business. And almost the moment I released the book, I started to hear from people in non-for-profit environments who are saying, this model works perfectly for us. And so that has proved out as well. And these days I get to use that expertise with for-profit, faith cause-based organizations almost as much as I do for the full for-profits.
Yeah, interesting. And probably less what I appreciated about it is as I read it, a lot of it, and this is meant to be a compliment to you, a lot of it is what seems to be common sense,
Right.
but you were able to take it and package it, add words to it, as you said, that I hadn't been able to kind of put together. And so for me, it helped formalize what was happening to us as organizations and what I had experienced. And so if you were in, what is your elevator speech for what predictable success is? Do you have that? Are you able to kind of just say it in this short comment or statement?
It's essentially a roadmap for any group of people who want to achieve common goals. Those are really the two movable parts, a group of people. So it's not individual development. There are some aspects of what I teach that people can use to help develop themselves as leaders. And I, as a wholly separate thing, I do a lot of individual coaching of leaders. But the predictable success model as a whole works for groups of people who want to achieve a common goal or a set of common goals. Once you have those two things, more than one person, set of common goals, then all of the principles of predictable success come in and apply. So a few of us were chatting just before we started the recording. I've been blessed over the years to hear many, many people tell me how they use the model within their own family. That's a group of people pursuing common goals. So those are really the two main variables.
Okay, very good. And so part of what was helpful for us in looking at the model, and I don't know if you want to describe just briefly what the model is, but what helped us is to identify where we were on that roadmap. And if we were at a place we didn't want to be, then how do we course correct and get on the right course? If we were a place we wanted to be, how do we stay there? So maybe build that out a little bit for us.
Sure. So if you think of the model as an arc, so if we were to toss a ball in the air, it's the arc that the ball would follow. And there are 3 growth stages on the way up, a peak stage, and then 3 decline stages. The first of the growth stages it's very intuitive. And I just want to reiterate what you said. All I've done is slap instantly recognizable phrases and stuff that anybody who's been involved in groups, organizations, businesses before will recognize instantly. So I'm not claiming any novelty. I just saw it and named it. So here are the 7 stages. Stage 1, early struggle. That's what it is. It's a struggle. If it's in a for-profit, it's a struggle to find your market. If you're in a faith or cause-based organization, it's a struggle to find the people you're going to serve, just getting that defined. 80% of all new ventures of any sort fail in that early struggle phase.
Hey everybody, it's Eric. I'm the content producer for the Global Leadership Podcast. If you're ready to grow your influence and maximize your impact, don't miss the Global Leadership Summit. This is an annual event featuring a world-class faculty and real-world leadership insights. Right now, early bird tickets are on sale through July 16th. You can get the lowest price available. Plus, we want to give you a bonus digital course from 2025 speaker Juliet Funt called A Minute to Think. So I've been attending the summit for over 20 years, and every time that I walk away, I come away with clarity, encouragement, and practical tools that I can apply to my life and my leadership right away. To get your ticket today, visit globalleadership.org/summit.
And Les, is that still true today? Is that pretty common and something that's verifiable? Because I hear that all the time, and I always wonder where that stat comes from.
So I've dipped in and out of the statistics over maybe 4 or 5 decades now, and the only caveat I would make is that it's based on essentially the filings made by those organizations that live long enough to make filings, right?
Yeah.
So if you ask the IRS here in the US, same thing with the Internal Revenue Service, the Inland Revenue Service in the UK, and anywhere in the Western world, they will tell you about 2/3 of all organizations fail because they can track it. But there's then all of these businesses, new ventures never get to the point of filing with anybody. And so taking that all into account, the best estimate is about 80%, still holds. And in fact, it gets worse. That's the average. It's worse in both times of recession, for obvious reasons, people aren't spending money. It actually gets higher at boom times as well. And the reason is when things are really good, everybody thinks they can do it. So people jump on the bandwagon and say, I'm going to launch my own business. Well, sort of a better
Hey,
problem.
one other question, less about the early stage. Have you identified why most of those fail? If 80% are failing, have you identified why you think they fail?
Two key reasons. One is they get started by people who don't have the DNA to do it. And that's, in my world, what we call a visionary leader. And that's the boomtown model, is that very often somebody who's worked with a visionary leader who has been successful will think, oh, I can do that. But they don't have that DNA, which is all about resilience. And at this point, it's about a lot of things, but in early struggle, it's about resilience, which ties into the second reason, which is people always wholly underestimate what it needs to make this happen. They, I'm going to completely genericize this, but folks, if you really nail them down, which I used to do a lot when I worked in the early struggle stage back in the early days when I was the serial entrepreneur, if you were to really nail people down, keep asking them the question, it turns out they think in about a year, I'll get this sorted, and it typically takes 3 years. And whatever number that they think of financially, it typically takes 3 times that. So one of those two things runs out too quickly. Or, and this is more the case in the faith cause-based world, just the passion and commitment gets drained because of the need to pay the bills before we get out of early struggle. So the old money thing comes in every time.
Interesting.
The 20% that do make it, they get through to the second stage, which is the first really good stage. There are 3 good stages, but one of them we're going to see is an illusion. So really only 2 good stages. And we're in the first of them. It's got the most exotic of all the names that I give it. I call it fun. And it's fun because it's not early struggle anymore. We've found our market. We know who we're serving. And we've got great enthusiasm. We're not existentially fearing for our lives every day because we can't pay the bills. We may not be making a huge amount of money. Maybe we are, but we know that, that bit of the process, that existential sort of birth process is gone. We've found our market. And for most of us, that's it. That's what we thought we were here to do. That's, I wouldn't say it's the end of the story, but most of us are wired to think, well, the rest of the time is going to be just a version of this, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. But what actually happens is the success that happens during fun, because fun businesses, fun churches are fun to be around. So they attract success. So they begin to grow fast. And there's just one thing that happens that is happening sneakily behind while this is happening, and it's complexity. We just grow in complexity. We get a little bigger, we have more people, we maybe have more locations, we offer more things, we start new ministries, and that complexity, it's sort of like milk curdling. You can't really tell quite when it happens, but at some point, you lift the jug of milk and and at some point in the growth of our fun business, our fun church, whatever it is, we look around and we think, when did we all get stupid? This is silly. We've had great years of success, and now we can't seem to stop just getting in our own way. And all that's happening is that fun has been all about one tiny little word, which we say over and over again, and that's yes. We say yes to everything. Why wouldn't we? This is fun. Let's do more. Open a new location, open a new ministry, hire another person. But every time that happens, our ability to deliver gets crushed by this complexity, just a little bit more, till it gets to the point where we can't anymore. And we move into the third of the growth stages. We're still on the growth side of the curve, but there's a very important stage that I call whitewater. And whitewater is all about making a decision. This is the second of our really difficult stages. Early struggle was tough, fun was great, now whitewater is tough. And we have a decision to make, which is, do we just reel back and go back into fun? Nothing wrong with that. That's part of my job when I work with leaders, is help them decide, is that what they want to do? Or do we want to push further and get to this peak stage, which I call predictable success? That's the top of the curve. What we need to do.
Can I just ask you, is that decision, when you hit that, are you deciding, do we want to keep growing and moving forward? Or are we content with where we are? Is that really the basic decision somebody's facing?
People tend not to make the decision early on because they don't know what's involved. And the decision comes when you're midway through trying to fix whitewater, because what becomes clear eventually, and it can take quite some time, is that if we're going to master this complexity, we need to adopt processes and systems. Fine so far, that sounds great. Here comes the tough bit, and adhere to them. Now, for a bunch of people in the organization, that's okay. But this is where our visionary leader comes back in. The number one reason people start new things, no matter which, for-profit, faith-based, whatever it is, it's a drive for freedom and autonomy. It's a huge part of it. Now, in the church world, a lot of it is what God's telling us to do. I'm not taking that away. Right. But just as for somebody who wants to start, making ceramic mugs, a large part of why they chose to be the person to do it is they want to do it in a way that they want to do. That's that need for freedom and autonomy. Now we're in Whitewater. We've had years of success. And the visionary leader is the one often who finds it hardest not to intellectually accept that we need systems and processes, but actually to adhere to them. And so the decision begins to coalesce around, do I want to go back to where I, in fun, could just essentially call all the shots? Or do I need to change my leadership style? In the for-profit world, it's easy to see this. It's moving from the founder to a CEO. It's the same dynamic, whether we're in a church or a cause-based organization. To discipline myself as a leader, to not just come in on Monday morning because I've read a book that I loved and throw everything out and change direction completely, but actually to begin to adhere to some systems and processes, because that's what's going to be needed to get past Whitewater through the other side and into predictable success. And although, again, it doesn't become clear for a little while, the only reason you would do it, the only reason you would put up with this need to adapt your leadership style, to bring in these systems and processes, to adhere to them as systemically as a organization, is that in fun we can grow. And if the listeners aren't watching, I'm making a sign with my hands of a convex curve. There's always a limit to growth in fun. You can only get so big, and that limit is Whitewater. So I have grown consulting companies that moved into predictable success and had literally hundreds of people. I am, by choice, in fun. I'm a one-man band. There's me and my dog. We do this thing, and there's a limit to where I can grow, clearly. If I wanted to build a consulting company in predictable success, that would be in order to be able to grow with what the cool kids call a J curve, a convex curve, that, up and to the right. And that needs the ability to repeat quality over and over and over again, which is about systemization. And so there's this pull. Do I want growth at the expense of scratching my personal leadership itch, in which case we're going to go for predictable success? Or do I need to be fulfilled so much in who I am as a visionary leader that we're just going to stay in fun? So that's the choice in Whitewater.
Yeah. So Les, what do most leaders then, because I'm guessing it's not easy for a visionary to move into that process, to adhering to the processes and systems that you're describing. So is the choice then to either, if it's an organization I sell the organization, move on, or somehow I've got to restructure myself to be able to adhere to those systems and procedures?
Well, part of the decision that can be entirely valid is to say, I don't want that. That's not why I started this. I'm going back to fun. I love that.
So keep the organization smaller. So
just keep it small. Yeah. And one of the easiest way to see this is because we've probably all seen a version of this. And I had personally, I lived in a beautiful little town, Marblehead, in Massachusetts for many years, and two of my closest friends, family, husband, wife team, had a fantastic coffee shop there. Place I loved. They opened a second location, fantastic. Then they opened across to another town, okay. By the time they opened their fourth location, they were in Whitewater, and they had a decision to make. And the decision they made was, we don't want to become Starbucks, right? We don't want to do this. And they closed two, kept two, and I don't know if they're still there, but if they are, they're in fun. They made that decision. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Alternatively, someone could say, I don't want that. The reason I started this, or now that I see it, I want that J curve. I want to build that. And so that may require them to exercise self-discipline. Some people make the change. It's all about this 4 inches between the ears. Often coaching helps an awful lot, but sometimes, big generalization, maybe 20, 25% of the time, a founding pastor, founding leader will say, I want that for my church. I want that for my organization, but maybe I'm not the right person to do that. I'm going to bring somebody else into the role of making that happen. And I'll either step back or I'll just change my focus. I'll focus on something different.
And what I find a lot less, both in business and the church world, is that oftentimes that visionary leader will just stay where they are, maintain this level of frustration that they somehow can't get beyond that, as though they think they can manage without creating the systems or the procedures in place. And so they're just constantly dissatisfied with where they are. So
yeah, I think that's a hugely important point, and just in terms of being of most value to our listeners, I want to spend just a second on that, if you're okay with it, David, because although when I describe all of this, as you say, and it is, I take it as a compliment. It sounds like common sense, right? Yeah. But however, until somebody has said it to you, nobody is thinking in terms of a curve, right?
Correct.
And what I see happen over and over again is really superb leaders achieve great success. They get out of early struggle and they achieve great success and fun. But the key in the fun stage, is what I call heroic leadership. You need that. That's not a bad thing. It's the way to lead and grow in fun. Is heroic leadership. It's charge. It's leading the way. It's making the diving catch. To pull the victory from the jaws of defeat. It's a time when you build the myths and legends of the church. It's a time when people talk about, you remember when we did this, and we do extraordinary things. And that is absolutely right. And to take your point, really the toughest thing to see is someone who doesn't realize that what got me here will not get us there.
Yeah.
Right? All of that was right until this point. And I see people all the time, leaders who are thinking, okay, they're clearly just not watching or listening enough. I need to triple down on this. And actually what you're tripling down on is what will not get you to that next stage of predictable success.
Hey again, friends. I have been studying Les's model now for a bit, and being able to name where we are has been really important on the team that I work with at the GLN. Even currently, one thing that Les said is really resonating with me. He mentioned in Whitewater, you have to remind yourself all of what got me here will not get me to predictable success. Beginning to have to make calls on process and saying no a bit more is personally challenging, but can bring great reward. What stood out to you? What ideas are you going to be chewing on? I want to challenge you to think through one takeaway from today's episode that you can apply to your leadership. Coming up next week, we have the second part to this conversation. Les and David will dive deeper into predictable success and even the great death rattle and what you can do about it. Thank you for joining us today. And one reminder, to get your best price on the summit, make sure to get your tickets today at globalleadership.org/summit. That's globalleadership.org/summit. You can still get early bird pricing for you and your team. Join us at a local host site or even online. I am so glad that you are a part of this community, because when the leader gets better, everyone wins.